Hey, Sonny, welcome.
What's up, brother?
It's good to
Good
have
to
you in the
see you.
house. You too. We got the Oval Office and we got skulls behind you. It's perfect.
We have what is it? The Mountain of the Skulls.
Well, most of the folks who listen to this know you as Sonny from P.O.D, but now you're an author.
Is that
So
what they say?
you're an author now. This is a big deal. So talk about this book and what's going on.
Um, yeah, I mean, I always kind of had in the back of my mind that I wanted to write a book. And then finally, through COVID and the pandemic and us being forced to be home, kind of presented the time for the first time. Always busy with POD, family life, community life, and so just started to sit down and write stuff down. I did it with a ghostwriter, so Steve and I would just get on the Zoom every once in a while, and I think he served more as a therapist, you know what I mean? Just kind of asking me a lot of cool questions and going over my life, and yeah, we finally put it together, and then got a publishing deal, and it's out now.
I think the whole point of a ghostwriter is you're not supposed to say you had a ghostwriter.
Eh, I got no ego, no pride. Don't even call me an author.
I'm only kidding, but you're a modest person. But no, so you did over the phone with Steve during the process? Is that how you worked?
Just more, it was more just him getting, kind of to know me, and then he would start the process. It's kind of like looking at a blank page when you're writing lyrics, you know what I mean? And he really did just kind of blurred out all the things that I was saying to him, and then it got me able to, change things up and move things around and add stuff and take away, and then together, we put it we made it happen.
Yeah. I think the people who read the book are really going to be struck by the fact that you're stuck between multiple worlds. It's
Mm,
not just the religious and secular, but it's also in an ethnic sense. You're down in southern San Diego. You're on the
mhm.
border of two countries.
Yeah.
You're between two countries. You're also, I don't think I realized that you also have an Italian heritage, Mexican
Yeah.
heritage, Guamanian heritage. Like you're at multiple crossroads. Talk about that and how the book talks about that.
Oh, I'm all mixed up. My grandmother and my mother come from Italy. My grandmother married a serviceman who was from the island of Guam. My grandmother on my father's side, she's a Hawaiian from the island of Hawaii, and she married a Mexican serviceman and then came over to the mainland. So we're all mixed up, you know what I mean? And but that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a negative if you don't look at it in a negative way. It's a huge positive. My dad used to talk about because he spent a lot of time in Japan. He would say kids who are half Japanese, half American, they're not half. They were called half. He said like they're double. You get
Yeah.
double. You get the
I
best
like that.
of all worlds, right?
Yeah, I
And
like
and
that.
and that's what America's about. But what is I noticed the forward by John Foreman of Switchfoot, who you guys have a
Mm.
lot of, but you guys are from different parts of San Diego. I don't think people help explain to people what is that like, and what is San Diego, your part of San Diego versus like where John is from. What does that mean, North and South San Diego?
Right. I think John is more, I mean, at least when I first met them and we were all still kids, it was more like the Poway area where Blink 182 comes from. But I think he might be from the on the beach life too. I was raised in like two exits from the Mexican border. So obviously we're very mixed, very diverse culture and ethnicities. Yeah, so you have all the different flavors, and then we come from a working class neighborhood, but it's, borderline poor, you know what I mean? It's just your average working American citizen. And so you're faced with there's a lot of gang activity. And because the border's right here, there's a lot of drug crossing, a lot of different, illegal business happening. And so that was normal. It's not like I look back and be like, oh, woe is me. It's just that's what you knew, and you learn how to adapt and survive in a sense. Um, but I was always faced with those decisions of what are you going to do? What choices are you going to make?
Yeah, and we don't have to get political, But what do you observe from your position? You've lived there for so many years now on the immigration situation. Like, what are your personal observations about anything related to that issue?
I mean, I've seen it ever since I was little. I mean, just even my neighborhood, you would see families illegally crossing in the middle of the night, just walking through your backyard, and that's always been heartbreaking. I never seen it as a political thing or like, oh, us against them. You know, my I just said my family are immigrants, and that's what's great about this country is that, and that's what makes up this country is that people from all walks of life can come here and have the same opportunity to make something of themselves and enjoy the freedom that America provides. Um, but I also do understand that there's a legal process, and you know I think the world has just made it almost a racist thing or a political thing. When to me it's math, it's common sense. I've been blessed to travel the world, and every country that I have to go into, I have to go through a process, a paper process. I have to pay for visas to work and play shows. It's a process, and I understand that. And I think if we can just make that clear, um, you know, so that we can do that. I get that because there's a lot of amazing families that have come over, and I don't think it's as cut and dry as just ship everybody home. But I do understand that there is a legal business crossing over. I do understand that there's good and evil on both sides, and that goes for any border. That's human nature. That's not just Mexico.
Yeah.
So I get it. I think it's a process. I don't think it's just as clear cut as some people try to make it seem, but I do understand why people want to come into this country to make better for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of cool in a sense, when you think about it. Like we grew up with the Germans having a wall, and there's of course a Great Wall
Mhm.
in China, and here we are in America. People want to come in so bad that we're tempted to build walls to keep them out. Like, what a great country this must be, if you look at it
Yeah.
that way, right? But yours is not a political. I mean, it's a you're living there. It's a practical thing
Hmm.
that you're seeing every day, and so I hear your heart on that, and that's a good
Well,
perspective.
I also understand just being over in Mexico, and this is the sad thing. It's not Mexican people. It's it's corruption of a country
Right.
that doesn't provide and doesn't provide the basic necessities for just any decent human being to live. I mean, when you cross the border, you're like, this is poverty.
Yeah.
This is 2025. It shouldn't be this way. So any person that goes crosses the border and sees the conditions just from water conditions and sewage conditions, you could understand why someone would want a better life. They deserve a better life. So the problem stems way past just the wanting or we love America so much we want to cross over. It's like they're actually fleeing a country that is corrupt. And it's not the people's fault. Yeah, there's such a political game. You have the cartels, you have there's selfish motives and gains that it's happening, and it's the people that suffer. So it's not the people that are our enemies. They just want a better life and they're stuck. And so I think every single American who was born here should thank God that they were born here and not somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked in a recent episode with Gene Simmons about this, that, being foreign born, he and I are both foreign born, and it gives you
Hmm.
a real special appreciation for America that I think people that are born here don't necessarily have. You s-
100%.
and you've
We're
traveled the
we're
world, and you've seen that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously every country has its problems, but when you travel abroad, I mean, I've been to countries where, it's the moment I get on American soil, I'm kissing the ground, you know what I mean? Because that's just out of gratefulness where he's like, man, okay, we have our problems. We're not, we're not perfect by any means, but man, we live in a great country, you know what I mean? And we're a work in progress, but yeah, why do you think everybody's trying to get to America? Because it's not like that in other countries, and it's sad in other countries.
Yeah.
So again, just because you were born here, I think again to be thankful. It's not just I mean, it is a privilege to be born here, but there's a reason why people want to come to America. And you could
Well,
talk all you want if you're here, whatever. You could say whatever you want.
yeah.
But in the day, if you've traveled and you've been to other places, you're like, hey, I accept all the flaws and then accept everything that's happened, past history, everything.
Yeah.
But today, America, is a good thing.
It really is, and it's a special place, and it's also a place where we self-correct, and
Mhm.
even like with issues of race, our issues are out in the open. Our racism that we deal
Yeah.
with, it's out in the open. We deal with it. I remember when I was a kid, we would watch like Jerry Springer or Oprah, and they would have skinheads on there, and in a
Hmm.
way, it was so good because we exposed it and we could see how ridiculous it was. It's almost more dangerous when it hides on the internet in circles and
Yeah.
groups. It's almost better to have it out in the open and deal with it and deal with it, and
Yeah.
so anyway, I having been in other countries where there is a lot of racism, but it's all hidden underneath the surface. You can't really exactly prove it. I like the fact that we deal with it, and it's uncomfortable, but we deal with it. But anyway,
Yeah. A lot. Yeah.
your background, like we talked about your racial background, but also I think that's kind of bled into the music, right? Because your music is kind of a combination of all these different forces. Talk about that as well. Like, how did that? What is the relation between your ethnic mix and also your musical mix? If that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, San Diego, and especially where I come from, is such a melting pot of peoples, and races, ethnicities, and cultures. And I grew up in a young rock and roll family, so I was exposed to rock and roll. But when you kind of get to that age, to 12, 13, 14, and you start discovering other music, it was more because I was surrounded by it. There was a lot of hip hop music. It was still fresh and new at the time. Reggae music. I loved music that had a voice and had there's a lot of conscious music. And then I started getting into the punk and hardcore music because they had a voice. They were saying something. It wasn't just entertainment. Every band is either a social justice issue, political issue, animal rights issue, whatever it was that you were into, vegan, whatever. They stood up and said it proudly, and I always respected that, and I never thought that I would be in a band, but when I got asked to join this band, it was more that hardcore scene where. Because I was new in my faith, I was saying, why can't I get up and why can't I scream about my faith and say, hey, God loves us, and He loves you, and having faith in Him is a beautiful thing. Why can't I do that? And so that was always my intentions. It wasn't that I'm a great singer or I love being in front of people or I even love making music. It was just I was going through something in my life that it made me want to scream, from the mountaintop, and P.O.D is how it started.
So I've always wanted to ask you this question, but as you look around you, I don't know how much you follow the podcasting world, but Russell Brand, if you've ever seen
Mm,
him lately, he's just
yeah.
like I love hearing him discover Bible verses because
Hmm.
he'll be like, Galatians 2:12, and he'll go off on how excited he is because he found
Oh.
Galatians 2:12, and the rest of us are like, oh yeah, we studied that in kindergarten, but was that
Yeah.
interesting? It's like he's giving a freshness to it that
Yeah.
it's gotten stale for a lot of us, right? And like I want
Yeah.
my kids to watch this because, I tell my kids like you guys are growing up in a candy store and you don't even realize
Mm,
you think this is
exactly.
normal, but to a guy who's just discovered water and
Yes.
he's been in the desert for
Yes.
30 years,
That's the
I,
perfect example. Yeah.
but how do you feel? Because part of you must go like, dude, I've been saying this for 25 years. What do you, where are you guys just discovering this? But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
do you?
not a,
And
I mean, this isn't a,
you were sometimes persecuted for that. So how does that make you feel?
right. I mean, this isn't a competition, you know what I mean? But I think the, I think that's natural. I came to faith at an earlier age, but like Russell, I get it. When you're set free, or you have an encounter with God, it's like, oh man, this is a beautiful thing. And maybe he just hasn't had to face certain persecutions from the institution of church and Christianity, maybe just because of his age, but I know we've seen his past unfold, and so he's been through so much. And when you're finally set free, you want to scream it from the mountaintop. For me, it was more from where I came from and what I was going through, that I was set free in a way that means I'm free in the Lord. I get to do whatever I want. The world is mine. I don't have to be a statistic. I don't have to end up in prison, die in prison, sell drugs, join a gang. I don't have to do these things. I'm free in the Lord. But my experience was the moment I came out and did that is when I experienced persecution from the institution of church. Because then I thought I was doing a beautiful thing. Hey, I made a declaration, I made a commitment to follow Jesus. And now I have people who say they believe in Jesus or love Jesus the way I do, is now telling me that my music is not of God, my tattoos are not of God, everywhere I think is not of God. And so I had to deal with that for such a long time. Um, but that just drives you to get closer to God, through His Word, through the intimacy of knowing Him, and then you can shut out all that noise, and then you do start to understand that, yeah, the religious people and the institution of church and Christianity, that's yeah, that'll tear you down, man, if you don't know who Jesus is.
And he hasn't really been exposed to that yet, right? So that's a good
Yeah.
thing that he hasn't had to deal with that.
Well, unfortunately, with social media, I'm sure he's reading all the text and everything that says whatever. Oh, you shouldn't have said this. You shouldn't have done that. And but again, when you've been set free, you're like, it's just noise. You're like, man, I none of what you're saying even matters to me. It's so minute. It's so small. Like I'm I've been set free from all that this world has to offer. So whether I say a cuss word or whether I watch a rated R movie, all the stupid stuff that you and I have had to go through, it's nonsense, man. And then you just start to see it for what it actually is.
Or your album covers. You got in trouble with an album
Oh,
cover. Right,
yeah.
right, what was that again?
I can't. Yeah, I can't. We can't do nothing right in far as holy, legalistic
Yeah.
religious people. Everything you do is gonna be wrong. So, again, I think when you get to a point in experience and or with your experience and your walk with God, you can see past that stuff and not let it affect you because it will.
Yeah.
I think I let it affect me for so long where it just drove a wedge between my relationship with God because I was looking to please people rather than listen to the call that God put on my heart. And like you said, with the album covers, we were just being artistic. We were trying to, you know, again, relay a message through art. But then when certain religious Christians would see it, they'd say, "Oh, that's too, Eastern religion. That's to this. That's to that." And the world is just seen it as a piece of art. And when you explain it to them, they're like, "Man, that's a beautiful thing." But to, again, to people who got it all figured out, they like to complicate things.
So for the record, you're denying that there was secret satanic messages in that album cover, right?
Bro, I'm not that witty, I'm not that I'm
All
not
right.
that clever, bro. And I would never do that. It's just ridiculous.
So talk about your mom and the role that she played in your faith journey and how that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, my mom, she came from Italy, and they came to the United States and grew up in a time of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You know what I mean? The hippie days, and so they had kids. Her and her sister had kids at their teenage pregnancies, and so they were just kids having kids, trying to figure out themselves. And so as I grew up, they were young, still doing drugs, selling drugs, living in the neighborhood, trying to work or working hard for a living. And so there was a lot of chaos around. But when God started to get a hold of the hearts of my uncle and my aunt and my mom and people in my family, it wasn't this religious change. It was a peaceful change. I'm used to them or watching them party and do all the stuff that they were doing, and then all of a sudden they want to go to church. All of a sudden, we hear worship music in the house, and the demeanor, everything was just changing. It was like they were finally growing up. So I never hated God. I mean, I grew up in a Catholic family, you know what I mean? So I always had love and respect for God. I just didn't know him on an intimate level. And so as I watched that with my mom, and then she was very young when she passed, but she was diagnosed, I want to say at 36 with leukemia. And to watch her have the peace of God throughout her sickness and have this joy, this hope in a God that, while she was technically dying, that was real. And so, you can't take that away. And so as I watched that, it just made me want to know her Jesus even more. And when she finally got really sick and she would pass away, I was faced with a decision, and I was watching her die. And so I had prayed, and I just said, God, I don't need any holy preacher to tell me I'm a sinner. I know that, but I do also believe that you're a God of forgiveness. You forgive sins, and I just made a deal with God. I said I don't want the European or Westernized, blonde hair, blue eyed, religious Jesus. I don't want the pay me $1,000 for the holy water Jesus. You know what I mean? The Jesus of the Crusades who slaughtered country after country and religion after religion. I don't want that Jesus. I want my mom's Jesus.
Mhm.
And if you can do that, I'm in. And so I prayed to God, and sure enough, by reading His Word and by talking with God, my mom's Jesus became my Jesus. And then the next prayer was just, Lord, how do you use my life? I don't have much to give. I don't have much to offer, but if you can use my life, it wasn't it wasn't as a burden. It was just that now that I'm experiencing who Jesus is, I want my friends to know. I want my neighborhood to know, my community to know, because the world has painted a false picture of who Jesus is. And the world has done that, but also religious people have done that. And so now that I was discovering who Jesus was, I just wanted people to know. And before you knew it, I got asked to do something that was totally and completely out of my comfort zone, and that was to be the frontman of a band that I never thought would leave San Diego. But I knew if you gave me the mic, I was just going to scream how good God was or is.
Mm. What was did you make any like vows with her or pledges or promises, or did she ask you to do something or not do something? What was those final moments like with her?
Well, she was pretty much comatose at the time, but I had had I had come home. She was in remission when she was, sick, and I had come home one night, and I was trying to sneak into my room. I went out and got high with my friends, and we were partying. And I came home, and she was sitting there, and I had a real conversation with her, and she said, "Son, when I die, I just want to know that you and your sisters are going to be in heaven with me." And I said, "Mom," I said, "You don't even talk like that. You're not going to die." And she said, "No, when I die, I need to know, son." And I said, "Yeah, mom, what do you want me to do? I just wanted to please her heart. I'll do whatever you want me to do, mom." And she's like, "Come to church with me." And I did. And I started to go, and I went to the big crusade. She took me to the big harvest crusade, and it was a beautiful thing. I didn't go down. I didn't surrender my life to the Lord then. But when she was in the hospital and sick, some things had happened that I knew it was God reaching out from heaven to me. And so that's when I sat in the parking lot and I asked God into my heart. And then I went back in the room, and she had been laying there comatose for quite some time. But it's the heart that keeps you alive. And so um, I went and I whispered in her ear. I said, "Hey, go and be with Jesus. Me and the girls were going to be okay. Don't suffer anymore." And it wasn't much longer after that she took her last breaths, and she went to be with Jesus. And so that was my first sign that, okay, God is good. It wasn't coincidence. She was holding on because of me. She knew that I wasn't right in my heart and in my mind. And so that's, God already answered prayer right then and there that day.
And then you helped popularize the name Nvea. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we had named our daughter Nvea, which is heaven spelled backwards. And then I think we were the first ghetto cribs on MTV ever. They used to always do the $1 million chandeliers and everybody living the life. And then they did a cribs with P.O.D, straight from the hood. And my daughter, I want to say she wasn't even one at the time. Um, and I'm holding her, and I had mentioned, I said, "Oh, this is my daughter. Her name is Nvea, heaven spelled backwards." And I guess it's from that moment on it really took off. And then I think within a couple of years it had become like the most popular name in the world or something like that.
And it
And
all
they all
started,
can, yeah, they all contributed to that moment where it was kind of exposed. And so that's a beautiful thing. It's just crazy how my daughter's going to be 25 now, and time has flown by so fast.
Where did you get the idea from? Had you heard about it somewhere else? Someone else did it, or were you the first
I
person?
don't I don't know, man. It just for some way I don't know. It was just in my head, and then I remember, telling my wife. I said, "Hey, if we ever have a daughter, I have the name. It's Nvea,
Mm,
and so I don't remember, but I think they at a certain time, I think it was, I forget what news station, New York Tribune or something, or somebody did a piece and they flew out, interviewed me and my daughter, and then they had given me the statistics. And
mm,
I think that there was a couple people in history
mm-hmm,
with their name that was spelled just like my daughter's.
mm,
So we don't know if there was the same concept, heaven spelled backwards, or if it was a cultural thing, you know what I
right.
mean, or a European thing, whatever. We don't know. They just know that after the MTV date, that it went from whatever it was, 4 people with the name Nivea to thousands and thousands of people. Yeah, so
Well,
it's
you might have been the very first intentionally.
and yeah,
That named it. That's pretty
but there
cool.
might have been someone so much cooler than me that already figured that out, but just never was on MTV to say.
See, now if you were thinking like Trump, you would have trademarked that name, like he trademarked
Oh
"Make America
gosh.
Great Again."
Oh yeah, I don't have that mindset, bro.
Because Reagan came up with that phrase in 1980, but he didn't think to get the trademark protection. And of course, Trump goes and like gets it trademarked. That's classic.
Oh, it's because he's a
So
businessman.
it's right. That's right. Well, for $5 million, you can come to America and get the gold card. I don't know if you saw that yesterday, but that's the latest of Trump's attempts to bring some money into the federal treasury. Anyway, let's go back. Let's go back to your. Well, I have to tell a fun story to the audience about you and we've known each other for 25 years or so and worked together. But one day I was in the studio with you guys, and I forgot what we were doing. We were just hanging out, and somehow the name Bob Bennett came up. I don't know how that
Mm,
came up, but Bob Bennett is
that's right.
a folk singer from the '80s, and let's just say he is about as the opposite of P.O.D. as you can get in terms of the music industry. He doesn't have dreads. You know, he's a very nice guy who sings very polite folk music and has a faith component to what he does. One of my
Mhm.
favorite songs from him, by the way, is when he experienced a divorce. He wrote a
Yeah.
song called "No Such Thing as Divorce."
Mhm.
And there's no such thing as divorce between the daddy and his daughter, and between kids and parents. Anyway, it's a beautiful song. Anyway, the topic comes to Bob Bennett, and somehow, and you guys have the most awestruck look on your face, like, you know Bob Bennett? And I go, yeah. How do you know who Bob Bennett is? And then you guys are like, well, could we talk to him? And
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure this out, So I call Bob and I'm like, here, Bob, talk to these guys. And you guys
Oh
were so
gosh.
awestruck, but there's a reason for that, having to do with your
Yeah.
mom. Anyway, I think he did a show for you guys for the family. But what's the attraction to Bob Bennett, who's not
Yeah.
musically in line with P.O.D.?
Oh, he's amazing. First of all, I love Bob. It was that song so I had went so one of those times I had went to church with or I had been going to church with my mom. I was when I was younger. And I'm already seeing kind of how church runs and just how they want to look, and he was a guest and he was doing worship there. There was a little intimate concert with him at our church, and he got up and he was honest and he was vulnerable, and he played that song, and he said, "I know this is taboo because I'm experiencing a divorce, but in the Christian world, that's a no-no." And he was saying all this stuff, how people look at him because he's going or he's got a divorce. And I just loved his honesty and his vulnerability. And then he went on to say that there is no such thing as divorce, because he was talking about being a daddy, and his child. And I always remember him. And so when my mom got sick and she was in the hospital, and she could no longer speak or open her eyes, um, I went to a Christian bookstore, and as I'm in this Christian bookstore, I just wanted to get some music that she can listen to just calm her spirit. And there was a Bob Bennett. I remember that name. I remember that gentleman that I had seen, and I was like, okay, at least I can trust that. I know that, and I had gotten a CD. I think it was a CD, and I would play that for my mom. And so I would sit in the hospital room hours and hours, and I would play this CD, and it was just so beautiful. And I got to know these songs. And then obviously later when my mom would pass away and stuff, I remembered this music. And so that's how special Bob was. And then when you had let me speak with him, he had heard of P.O.D. and he was just floored. And so him and I built a relationship, and we were able to have conversation. And then in a really tough time in my family's life, I called him and I said, "Do you think you can just come and hang out with my family and play for them?" And so he came to my house, he sat in my living room, and he just played for my family, and it was like healing. And
Mm.
because everybody remembers this quiet moment in the hospital room with my mom, and I would play that music. And so he's just kind of become, just without his knowing, part of my history and my family's history.
You just never know. You never know
You
who's
never
listening to your
know.
music, you know? That's the
It's
amazing thing about
beautiful.
music is that we're never going to know in this lifetime how, I mean, that's the case with a lot of art, right? A lot
Yes.
of artists have no idea how much
It
a
reaches.
record
Yeah.
impacted me. And I'm not going to, usually write a letter to somebody and say, but
Right.
occasionally it's just fun that these things pop up.
Yeah.
But
No, super cool.
it was just such a dichotomy.
Yeah.
But it's a good lesson that music transcends, and the fact that somebody with your musical background still listens to a folk singer,
Hmm.
um, that just shows how broad your range is too, right?
Well, for sure. But I think what I really got, I mean, obviously there was the emotional connection, but I really kind of tuned into his storytelling. And so without
Mm,
even knowing it, or, now I look back at a lot of my lyrics, and it's a song like Youth of the Nation, perfect example. It's a story. I'm
hmm.
telling a story, and then when you look back and you're like, man, maybe I picked that up from Mr. Bennett, just listening to all of his music. And it was such a beautiful thing because he had said too, obviously his career and doing what he's done, but you always go through those doubts of like, hey man, did my music mean anything? I guess as artists we're always so sensitive, and but he's telling me, he's like, all of my career I always wondered, who has my music reached, and did it do what I wanted it to do? And he was like, by you sharing that story and knowing that I could be a part of your journey, and then you going on to with your platform and selling the records that you have, he's like, I feel honored. And I said, no, bro, I'm so honored. So that was cool that we had that. It's like we did this together. We need each other to encourage one another, to build up each other, to inspire one another. And that's exactly what he did, for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was amazing. So, you talked about Youth of the Nation a little bit. Um, I think back to Alive. This dates both of us, but this is like what, 24 years ago. But that was an amazing story. Didn't that come out like on 9/11?
No, Alive was out. I want to say it was number one on rock radio, but I know it was number one for sure on MTV's TRL. And
Hmm.
so it's the perfect setup. We have a number one song at video and rock and roll. Our album Satellite is dropping on 9/11, and it was a perfect setup. We were doing well. And then here comes, obviously the tragedy, the Twin Towers, everything in America. Um, but as tragic as it was, there was this song of hope
Hmm.
that was, and at the time it was just the United States. But after that, it would go on, and then it would take our music worldwide.
But so the album came out that day. Was that Satellite came out that day?
Satellite came out on 9/11. This was the day when they still sold records, and and
Right.
and musicians still got a piece of album
Yeah.
sales. And
The
we
good
were
old
at
days.
the good old days. We were actually at the Tower Records, I think, or somewhere, a warehouse or something in San Diego at midnight on a Monday night,
Mm.
because people can buy the record. And so we had a line, we signed autographs, we hung out. And then the next day on 9/11, we had planned on doing an album release show at the Whiskey up in Hollywood, or the Roxy, one of those. And so we came home, sleep a couple hours, get some rest. And then I remember waking up in a panic because my mother-in-law had called my wife and turn on the TV, turn on the TV. And we get up, and instantly it was just like our record didn't matter anymore. Here we were in this kind of surreal moment, and then that kind of started the whole process of healing. But it was because, a lot to do with that song, because America had banned a lot of music at that time because it was too sensitive,
Hmm.
or it was just too disturbing. But we happened to be one of those bands and one of those songs that they allowed for it to be played for the public, to bless people, to encourage people. And so we were always proud of that moment, that we were seen as an encouragement.
Yeah, what a perfect, I mean, the lyrics are just perfect for that kind of a moment, right?
Mm,
And the video of
yeah.
you guys sort of having a car crash in slow motion, and thinking about those videos too, there was a what was the ping pong video? Boom. It was Boom, right?
Boom.
That
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it sounds kind of hokey, but it was such a cool, because videos were getting very formulaic at that point, right? It was kind of the
Mhm.
same thing as girl in a car,
Yeah,
White
yeah.
Snake, David Coverdale, whatever from these. But then you had to come up with these new things. So there's the ping pong, like you're playing ping pong in slow motion with somebody. Walk us through that one. That's
It
always
was,
been a
I
fun
mean,
one.
yeah, yeah. And just say, I'm so glad we didn't release Boom as our first single, because that was
Right,
actually an
right,
option. And if we would have released that, it would have never been aired or played. And so, but then here we are. We release Alive, and then we release Youth of the Nation. So we have these two back-to-back, very very serious songs, that would go on to become anthems. And so by the time we get to the third single, we have this Boom song, and it's more fun. It's about our neighborhood. It's a little bit more of our character. But
right.
our first inclination was like, oh, we'll do a street video, kind of rough, kind of tough, and but I think we had gotten the ping pong treatment, and Marcos, our guitar player, he was the only one that actually liked it, and he kind of said like, man, we need to show like kind of the playful side of us. Everybody always thinks we're so tough and hard. We're from the street, but we're good guys. We're fun. We had two serious videos already, and so we went with that treatment. And so it was more of us playing ping pong, being coached and playing against other teams, and it was just us being silly and being fun at the same time, just to show the lighter side of us.
Yeah, well, I think you accomplished that. And of course, you've had a lot of hits and videos since then, but those are the ones
Mhm.
that just kind of stand out in my mind. I think because it was such an emotional time for all of us, we didn't know what was
Yeah,
happening. I think that and COVID were two times that were just sort of hard for us to figure out what was happening in the world.
yeah.
But let's talk about that because you and I communicated during COVID sometimes. That was a really, and in the book you talk about it. That was a really really rough time for you because there goes your entire business model. If you
Yeah.
can't tour as a band, what do you do?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at first, we had just toured our butts off all in 2019. We had gone back to Europe twice, South America stuff, United States, and we had already planned on going back to Europe in 2020, and just busy. We had just released a record. We were staying busy. It felt like it was a good season for us. And then COVID hits in 2020, and then we're told, we're gonna have to stay home for a couple months. And to be honest with you, man, I was excited. I was so stoked. I'm like, you're telling me I have to stay home? I've been so unroutine for so long, so many years, and now you're telling me I have to stay home. I was excited. I was looking forward to it. But 2 months go by, and 3 months, 4 months, and like, wait a minute, this is how I make a living. I don't have it like a lot of rock stars where they're just sitting, on piles of money. It's like I'm a blue collar musician. I always say we don't tour, we don't eat. That's just how it goes, because nobody's making money off record sales and other ways. You got to be creative these days to be an artist in general. And so I yeah, I loved the fact that I got to be home, but that it just got a little scary, because before you knew it, we were sitting home almost 2 years, and it still affected the touring economy. It's all the prices, everything's gone up. It's tough for touring musicians these days.
Mm. Yeah, I wonder if you would have probably had to choose a different path if you grew up in this time period because it's very hard to make a living doing what you do, right?
It is, but I think there's a lot of people that are doing stuff. It's forced a lot of artists to do things independently. There's a lot more avenues for artists to have a career and create revenue and do things in different ways that they normally wouldn't do. We're old school where it was like sign a label, to a label, get your music out, and hopefully they don't rip you off, hopefully it does well. And so we're still stuck in that kind of that model. But now with, free music and streaming platforms and stuff like that, they just need to figure out a way to pay artists because what's the incentive if we're being robbed of the past music we've made, and
Mhm.
now there's no incentive to write new music because or art because you're not going to pay me for it. Although advertisement companies and companies in general are making billions of dollars by using our music and our art to as the clickbait to get to where you want them to go. And then so they just got to figure out a balance. You know what I mean? It's pretty criminal of what they're doing to young artists, because every year we get a report. Oh, you guys have your music has been streamed on Spotify 200 million times, and you're like, I didn't even see nothing. I'm not even asking for a penny for each stream. Just give me a portion of that penny, and I can actually make a living, and then continue to do what I love and create art, so that I just want to put my kids through college. I'm not asking for the mansion on the hill. I just want to survive.
So right now, your only source of revenue is touring and merch, basically?
Pretty much is our biggest. And here I am 33 years later, and I'm like, I'm not trying to tour 13 months out of the year.
Hmm.
We knew if we worked hard at the beginning, we wouldn't have to do it in our old age. But now it's like we have to tour even more. And so that's a battle because my kids are older, you know what I mean? I'm getting older. It's like, what do you do? We're not the 22-year-old hustler that's out there and loves being on the road 24/7, It's like it's work. I mean, and we're always working, but we just have to figure out a way to pay the artists for what they're doing.
Two of my favorite moments with you, because you made so many media appearances over the years. One was on the Howard Stern show, and one was on Bill Maher. And
Mm.
I remember the Stern show. He was just non. I hope you do Howard's podcast or show because it was so much fun to watch you guys. But he could not figure you guys out. He was like he had like John for your A&R guy in there, I think, or somebody in
Hmm.
there. And he was like, "Now you guys tour, but you don't really partake of all the ladies and everything." And he was like literally confused of why you'd want to be in rock and roll and not have the accoutrements. And then
Yeah.
Bill Maher, you remember this? Bill Maher was
Yep.
something about, maybe you could remind. It was like about your mother. Like he said he couldn't believe in God because of cancer, and you came right back at him.
Yes, yes. I think it was me. It was Mrs. Cunningham from Happy
That's
Days.
right.
Yeah. And then I forget who else he had, but he also had another very extreme kind of Christian guy who did exorcism, and he was
Oh,
very,
right. Bob, somebody.
yeah, I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
say he
yeah.
was very legalistic, and he actually kind of put us on there together to kind
Right.
of pit against one another. So I think he had a plan to get us to argue and fight against each other.
Right.
But he had said, "Yeah, I refuse to believe in God," and because he was talking about prayer and it doesn't work, and then he said, "Yeah, if I prayed." My mom got cancer and I prayed for God to heal her and he didn't and something like that. And I said, well, my story is actually quite the difference. I said, I actually discovered who God was by watching my mom die of cancer. And so it kind of stunned him, and
And
he was very
he cut
quiet.
he
He's like,
he cut to commercial right away.
yeah, yeah, he did. But he, I still got the opportunity to kind of explain my story. And but he kept going back to this Bob guy, and he kept saying, "Well, what do you think about that? What do you think about that?" Because he was waiting for it, because he was talking about my tattoos, he was talking about my hair, he was talking about our music, and he was waiting for this guy to just slay me.
Right.
But little does he know, did this Bill know, and I don't even know if I've ever told this story, because we knew that this guy Bob, whatever his last name was so, I don't know. He's so zealous. He was just so vicious. We had actually went to his dressing room before, and we just said, "Hey, we might have different philosophies, and and or whatever." I said, but I was like, I love Jesus, man, and I don't want to get up on in here and make a spectacle of our God. I said, you're welcome to have your beliefs, and I have mine, and we don't have to agree on music and whatever. We don't have to. We can worship in different places. It's all good. I said, but I do want you to know that I am born again. I'm set free. I love Jesus. I'm forgiven. And I just want to glorify his name. And he was stunned. he was stunned. And so we just, my uncle was with me, Wub, the guys, and we just said, Mr. So and so, I said, if you can just pray for us, man, let's pray that we go out and that we represent our King to the greatest of our abilities, and then we don't look foolish and we don't make our God look foolish. And bro, he prayed and just said, God, we just be with us. And dude, and if you watch that, he's holding his tongue the whole time. When normally when he's been on there in the past,
Right.
he would, yeah, he brought out his sword and he was slaying people. But in that, and so Bill kept looking to him. Don't you have something to say? Wouldn't you like to add to that? And he was just like, he didn't
Yeah.
say nothing, man. Yeah.
That I forgot about Mrs. Cunningham, Marion Ross. Weirdest
Yeah.
of weird stories. I met her at a party maybe 10 years ago, and she gave me such great insights for the Reagan movie of all things. And
Mm.
she said she had been to the Soviet Union on a missions trip many years ago. And she told me the things that she saw. Like
Wow.
she saw a poster of Ronald Reagan with like talons looking like a creature, and it was on the walls designed to scare the Soviet people about America and Ronald Reagan. But it was just these weird little
Wow.
insights like that that I picked up along the way. And of all people, it's Marion Ross so randomly at a birthday party.
Yeah.
I forgot that she was on that. She was like saying he's such about you. She was saying he's a nice boy, and right, she was kind of
Yeah.
complimenting you.
She was. She was being Miss Cunningham.
Right, right, right. Look, his hair is so nice, and look at these
Yeah.
dreadlocks, and like
The
there's a
tattoos, she was
right.
like her grandson or something, or like her
Right, right,
son.
right.
Yeah,
That
she
is
was pitying
so
me.
that is so funny. And the Stern Show, what do you remember from the Stern Show? The reason I bring this up is because today it's normal, but in those days,
Yeah.
people didn't go on, you guys didn't go on shows like that, right? Artists that have a faith background were not really welcome at places like that generally, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think more artists with a faith background, they kind of stick to their own communities. They
Right,
they
right.
stick in the Christian world, the CCM world. Whereas us, we're a rock and roll band. We're like, come on, who you got to be out of your mind if you're not going to go on the Howard Stern show. It's like,
Yeah,
but not only that, I mean, a lot of Christians are afraid of their own shadows, and so or they just see that as like, oh, that's evil, it's the devil's playground, and they don't have never really tapped into the power that they have through the
right,
Spirit of God. For us, it was like, of course, we want to be on the Howard Stern show, and it wasn't like he knew who we were. We weren't even doing nothing. It was he actually owed a favor to one of the Atlantic reps, and
right.
he had asked, I owe you a favor. What band
Yeah,
do you want
that's
to come
right.
on my show? And so he
That's
said, I
right.
want P.O.D. They're on Ozfest. They're killing it. Bring them on. And so when he heard that we were a quote unquote Christian band, he thought he was gonna have a field day with us. That's what he does. Shock jock. He was gonna rip us to shreds. And we could even hear it. We were in the dressing room. We can hear the live show, and they're already getting ready to mock us and to do their thing. The moment we walk in, he sees us and he sees our tattoo, everything, and he's like, wow, he's a Christian band, and he was floored. He was floored, and so he was asking questions, and they were genuine questions. I think he really wanted to know, but he was still trying to be funny, still trying to get his digs in wherever he could, and but we went toe to toe with him, and because we went toe to toe with him, he had respect for us, and then we had ended up seeing Howard many times again out in New York, and did his show again, and yeah, he knew who we
Yeah.
were.
I think he ended that episode with, so you guys don't have groupies. He goes, this is a new point of view, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
And he kind of cuts away to commercial,
He was
right?
just being funny. He's like, so all you
Yeah,
guys are married and you
right,
don't do rock and roll for the drugs and for the girls. And we're
right.
like, no. And he's like, and I think I mean, he was being funny, but he was genuinely just saying, because he's a worldly guy. He's a guy of the world. He's like, why wouldn't you be doing this for all that stuff? It makes no sense to him that, hey, we might actually love the art that we do. We might actually have conviction. We might actually respect the people that are around us. And maybe we don't want the things of the world.
May,
And so that
you
was,
may not want to bring a disease back to your wife. You'll
yeah.
see things like that, right?
Yeah, so again, I'm not afraid of those conversations. I think it was them being exposed for the first time, and I think it was. It's not like they had ever done any other artists who claimed to be believers or Christians, and so it was a rock and roll platform, and you had a real rock and roll band up there that was just saying, "Hey, man, I love God." That's it.
Do you ever give any thought to the idea that you sort of, the idea of touring is not exactly conducive to a healthy family, right? Like it's almost
Right.
like the very structure of the way you tour America or the world was built around a nomadic, like a single guy who's out having fun, as
Yeah.
opposed to like a residency where you set up shop and people come to you. Have you ever given any thought to the fact that the very foundations of the rock touring business is not very healthy for families? In your case, your wife and kids.
100%. But I've had to learn this through experience. You know what I mean? But again, it's like I didn't ask to be in this band. I felt like this is a calling of my life, is just to go out and spread as much love as possible, spread as many seeds into the hearts of people everywhere. But that has come with the cost. That's I've missed a lot of anniversaries and birthdays, and I've missed a lot of things with my kids, and
Mm,
and there's a cost to that.
mm,
But it's also at a cost that I can reason with, because I know that, and my family knows that I'm out doing what I believe God has called me to do. But I also, in my years, have realized and come to a hard realization that it's not a burden. God didn't put this in my heart as a burden. I'm not here to save the world. I can't save the world. And if I'm going to follow Jesus and be the best example I can, then my ministry starts at home. You know what I mean? My everything starts at home. I can't, so many people, whether they're pastors or missionaries, they go out to save the world, yet their own home crumbles.
yeah.
And I'm not going to do that, nor do I believe that God expects me to do that.
Yeah.
God doesn't need me to save the world. He already saved it. All we have to do is just live that out. And so there is a balance. And so even now, as artists or musicians aren't paid for what they're worth and what they've created and have done, I have to be smart in how much I am gone now. And I love touring, I love playing music, but I also realize that or I have realized that my time at home and with my family is so much more important. And so I've been very mindful throughout all the years, to be very present when I'm here with my wife and my kids, because I know that music takes me away a lot, and it has taken me away a lot.
Yeah. So there has been a cost. I mean, you've seen it in your
100%,
family.
100%. And but my family also, they know what's up, but I also don't believe that God is saying, there's no way, shape, or form is God asking me to sacrifice my family, to get His message out, or for anything, because God, He does it on His own. This is just an honor and a blessing of my life and my family's life, that we get to be a part of what God is doing, throughout the ages and into the future in this world. And it's because He loves people and He loves this world. And so to watch God move is an amazing and beautiful thing. And I enjoy that too. I'd much rather, as many lives as I've seen destroyed by rock and roll or the things of this world, I've also been able to see God restore and create new creations out of brokenness that is very addicting. It's like I love it. I see too much evil in this world. And so when I get to be a part of the beautiful things and the good things that God does, it's such a treat. It's such a treat to be a part of. And so I always want to live the rest of my life just being a part of those good things that God is doing.
Well, Sonny, thanks for coming in and also for the book. And for those of you who are listening or watching, be sure to pick up a copy of Son of
Yes, sir.
Southtown.
I have it right here. You
There you
told me to get
go.
it.
There it is. And it's on his shirt. So they can buy a shirt and buy the
Oh,
book.
hey, Siri.
You can buy everything, right? But no, it's been great to have you and great to hear kind of more about what makes you tick. And let's do it again sometime. And
Oh,
have a
thank
great
you.
rest of your book tour.
Oh, thank you so much, bro. I appreciate you, man. So good to see you.
Take care, Sonny.
Okay, brother.